Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We're doing something different. This is Text Me When You Get Home, and this is Becky Koster.
Year-old Becky Koster disappeared after texting her mother that she made it home from a night out with friends. Authorities turned to her cell phone for clues. A 24-year-old girl that just miraculously went missing. My phone was my oxygen. Every family's holding out for the hope that they're going to find their loved one. When I got the text message, that was my lifeline to Becky. I was suspicious about all those things. I looked at the detective and I said, "This isn't like her. Where is she?" Somebody's playing a trick. A young woman is missing tonight after leaving a bar with a stranger, then texting help to a friend. You are watching her terrifying abduction. A missing woman's new body was discovered in this ravine. Miraculously, the young woman survived. There is an alarming crisis of violence, kidnapping, and murder against innocent women. The senseless murder has struck a chord with thousands of women. This has sparked a global movement online of women sharing their own fears. They're united under a hashtag, Text Me When You Get Home, a phrase that women are all too familiar with. From the moment she was born, she was just sweet, wouldn't hurt a fly. She was the light in the room. See, Becky's not turning away. She would do quirky things like steal my bologna and carry it in her pocketbook, and then go out with the girls and she'd be popping a piece of bologna. I mean, what do you have? Bologna, you want some? If you were feeling down, she would just cheer you up. You could not be sad around Becky. It was just impossible. My first impression of Becky was I didn't know people out there were still so genuine, and the smile would reach the back of her ears. It didn't matter who you were. Becky saw the good in everyone. She started out working in the same hospital as me on the cardiac floor because she liked to help people. The first time I met Becky, we were working together. She was just bubbly and full of life, like warm. We became instant friends. She treated every patient like it was her grandma or her grandfather, and she was just a genuine great person. Becky was working with a developmentally disabled young man. She just found that kind of work quite fulfilling. She loved him. Becky and her mom have a friendship relationship that anybody on this planet would die for. My relationship with Becky was not just mother-daughter, but we were also friends. Call you later. We had an awesome relationship. We told each other practically everything. We spoke every day. We like to hit up the local bar, grab some drinks to socialize, watch movies, listen to music, dance. We were great friends. She was so beautiful. She never really acted like it. Girls were jealous of her. Becky was excited about life. Becky did have a boyfriend at that time. Dan was a new relationship. He seemed very nice, very infatuated with her. And she liked spending time with him. He'd pick her up from work, and I saw it in his eyes, like he adored her. I knew Dan well because he was living with me. I believe Dan did love Becky. They had a great relationship together, and they were very happy together.
Becky was always good at checking in because she knew I worried, so she would always let me know when she was home or would text me when she would reach her destination.
Becky was absolutely very communicative. She would always answer her phone for sure.
I had worked the night before, so I slept, I think it was till about 2:30, 3 o'clock. Um, Made dinner. I was getting ready for work. Becky told me earlier in the evening that her plans were to go out to a bar with her best friend Nicole and some other friends, and then she might meet up with Dan later.
Nicole is Becky's right hand. She's her best friend, and Nicole is my sister-in-law.
Before I went to work, I told her, make sure you text me that you got home. And she said she would. It was roughly around 3 in the morning. I was on my break. I was at work. And she had texted me stating that she was home and that she was going to bed and that she loved me. And I said, okay, have a great sleep. You have work in the morning. And good night. I love you. It was around 6 a.m. I was still at work. My husband had texted me stating that Becky didn't show up for work. So I called. It rang the 6 times that it usually rings and then went to voicemail. I left her an angry message that, it's her responsibility. You need to get to work. You need to get up. I got no response. I waited about 10, 15 minutes. The second time I called, it went straight to voicemail. I said, something's not right.
I have never known Becky to just not show up for work. She cares too much about her patients. And if she didn't show up for work, there was a reason, she would call.
On my drive home from work, I was very anxious. When I pulled in the driveway and I knew Becky wasn't at work and her car was there, I was angry. I thought that she had a little too much to drink and overslept. When I went in the house and I opened the door to her room and her pocketbook was there, but her phone's missing, no Becky. Then I called Nicole and asked her if you've seen Becky. She told me no. Nicole told me that when she was ready to go home, Becky said her boyfriend Dan would give her a ride home. So I called Dan, and that's when Dan told me that Becky was not with him. He had dropped her off at home. He made sure she got in the house. And I had said, Dan, please don't lie to me. I just want to know that she's okay. And he said, I swear to you, she's not here.
She didn't show up for work. We knew something was wrong. You just thought maybe her phone's dead. Maybe she has no way to call.
It was not typical of her to have drunk nights and disappear. And if she did notify people.
After my husband had gotten home, that's when we decided to call the police because it wasn't like Becky to not call and let us know where she was. And by that time of day, Becky would have been up and on her phone, and nobody's heard from her.
She wouldn't do this. That's all I kept thinking to myself is there's no way she would do this to her mother. Like she would not just not answer her back. Like she just wouldn't. And I just didn't feel good about the situation. Like I was on eggshells.
My husband had called the police and said we needed an officer at the house, that our daughter was missing. So they sent an officer to take his report. When the responding officer arrived, he asked us the basic questions. Dan had stopped by while the officer was there. Dan asked me, was Becky seeing anyone else? And I was like, no. And he was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. And this is really not the time. Maybe he thought she was seeing someone else and was with him. It was just very odd that he asked that question.
I really didn't believe like the magnitude of really what was happening until she wasn't reaching out to her mom. When I spoke with Barbara, I saw the pain in her eyes. It's like what any mother would be that's desperately looking for their child.
Becky was popular. Becky was beautiful. Becky had no enemies whatsoever. Everybody loved her. I just know that I wanted to see my daughter. I wanted to hold my daughter. I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to know that she was okay. My heart sunk. I became very afraid. I didn't know where my peekaboo was. Why hasn't she called? This isn't like her. Where is she? I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I basically stayed up until I passed out from exhaustion. All of Becky's friends had been camping out. It looked like a slumber party in my living room. The phone was moving from place to place. It'd be off, then on, then off, then on. Wherever we got a ping, we would call the detectives, and then they would search in that area. And if it was close by us, we went out calling her name, screaming her name. Nothing, we couldn't find her. But everywhere we could think of.
It was a tight knit community, so there were search parties that were put together to help find her. Everybody really wanted her located.
I remember driving back to the bar where she originally was. We spoke to the bartenders, we spoke to the manager, we spoke to everyone there. Nobody knew anything about her. Dan was concerned and came with us to look for her.
At this point, my thoughts about Dad were that he had Becky. We just didn't know where. And we came down hard on him. We did. We had people who didn't even know us staking out where he lived to see if he would slip up.
Dan was last seen with her. I just understood why he was a number one suspect.
Dan was very upset and he was spiraling out of control that people were turning on him and accusing him.
Anytime you have, especially a missing person, first thing and the most important thing that the police have to do is establish a timeline. They need to know who the last person was that was in contact with them, because more often than not, the last person in contact with them is the person who knows where they are. So they certainly looked at the boyfriend, Dan.
I never suspected Dan. Just the way that he looked at her, the way that he cared for her, it didn't give me reason to believe that he would do anything to hurt her.
At that time, there were no other people of interest because Dan was the last person that was seen with Becky, and we had no other ideas. I went out to my sister Elaine's house to drop off her Christmas present. And while we were there, I just happened to look on my phone. And I got a text from Becky. Mom, Dan has me tied up in a basement. I need your help. It was a rush of a little bit of hope. I called the phone. There was no answer. I'm thinking to myself, as with any child, the first person they call is mom. And I was just, dial 911, call 911, they will find you. When I got the text message, we called the detectives and I went home so we could get on the laptop and do the family locator.
They got to Dan's house. The police treated this as they should have. So they went in full force and did a full search. Becky was not there. And it became apparent that something more is clearly going on here.
If Becky was not in my house, I would have known because it's my house. What I'm thinking at this point is somebody's playing a trick.
My phone was my oxygen. That was my lifeline to Becky. Every time I heard the sound and I received a text, my heart stopped. The second text message had stated that she believed she was in coma, that she believed that he was going to kill her.
Now.
So we all jumped in our vehicles and we went to where it was pinging, which was a commercial area approximately 20 minutes from my house. And it was late at night, so everything was closed, but we were just banging on doors anyway, calling her name, so possibly if she could call out, we could find her. We left Comac, no Becky, we went home, feeling defeated, deflated, exhausted.
Barbara was a wreck. She didn't know where her daughter was. She wasn't answering her texts. She wasn't answering her phone calls. She was very upset.
So back to square one.
According to her family, Dan Mayer and his sister insist they brought Koster home from the bar last Friday, but the family has its doubts about that.
At that time, it was very stressful at my house. Everyone was blaming Dan. My best friend was being accused for murder. The text said that Dan had her, but Dan was with me. Dan did break down to me. He did cry. He wanted to find out who set him up. It was intense.
Regarding the text messages, myself and Becky's friends, we talked about it, that maybe it was possible that, if Becky had her phone in her pocket, she could possibly text. We were trying to stay positive.
Every family's holding on to the hope that they're going to find their loved one. And even if they find her tied up or at worst injured, they're going to find her alive.
I was suspicious about all those texts.
Clearly, the messages were not coming from Becky. The police obtained the footage from the bar. They showed it to the friends who confirmed, yeah, that's the guy in the bar. They looked at her phone records to find out the last activity on her phone, which reflected the last series of calls, of course, right before she went missing, right after she got home from the bar. They were able to see who was the last person that was communicating with Rebecca. Prepaid phones can be harder to track for the police. Sometimes it's harder to obtain subscriber information on a prepaid phone because they don't collect it necessarily, and they don't always verify your address. And then they obtained cell site information. You could see clearly that Becky was home, and you could see the initial phone call, the suspect is West. And then as there's another exchange, he's getting closer, and there seems to be at least another call or two closer in time to when that phone arrived in the cell site location where Becky's phone was. The police put out, the nationwide notifications, and of course it has descriptive information about the person to other law enforcement agencies.
The news was camped out outside of my house every day.
Rebecca went missing last week. Police say she'd gone out to a bar in Holbrook Thursday night.
The state troopers in Connecticut, they get a report of what appears to be a brush fire. And they realize in no short order that it looks like it's a human being.
I was aware that a body's been found in Connecticut, burned in the woods, but we did not think it had a connection to Becky's disappearance.
And as fate would have it, I believe he was an assistant fire chief, happened to come upon that body, and likely within seconds after it was set on fire. He saw the flames immediately and extinguished the fire. Had he not, that fire would have burned red hot and there would have been nothing left to examine. So the medical examiner's office then conducted their autopsy, and what became apparent to the state police present at the autopsy is that the killer really went out of his way to remove any identifying features so that the body could not be identified. The digits of the fingers and the toes were missing. She had a tattoo that was missing from her ankle area. The tattoo with the lower back clearly looked like it had been cut. Just imagine for a minute, the police here in Suffolk County have a missing person. They're getting these text messages. So they clearly believe that this person is the victim of foul play. They don't know yet whether she's deceased. So they're still looking for a missing person. The police in Stonington, Connecticut have a dead person. So they put out their own missing person alert, and they put out physical characteristics that they have. And in the remains in the tongue, there was a stud, like a tongue stud, which the killer either forgot to remove or didn't know it was there. So the Connecticut state troopers contacted Suffolk County, and they said, our young lady, Becky, had the same unique tongue stud. They had an identification based on the piercing, but that's not going to be a positive identification enough for a homicide investigation, much less, for a trial. They obtained Becky's dental records, and they did a formal comparison of Becky's dental records to the dental records of the remains. And so at that point, there was a formal identification of Rebecca based on the dental records.
I believe it was a Wednesday. The first time we decided to leave the house just to get something to eat. And the detectives called my husband on his cell phone, and he said, we have to go right now. They're at the house. I went in the house, and I looked at the detective, and I said, did you find? And they said, we found Becky, and we're very sorry that she was murdered. And I ran outside. And I just screamed, "Someone murdered my baby." I felt like half my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Just the thought that my daughter was never coming home.
It's unclear what kind of forensic evidence the police were able to recover from her charred remains. At this point, they do not have any suspects in custody. For setting a body on fire, you're trying to destroy evidence of murder, not evidence of an accident. And fire is destructive. They examine the remains and they see that the body or the remains are charred, but they see wrappings and sheets and some duct tape around the layers. They very meticulously pulled the duct tape off of the sheets, so no one really thought they were going to obtain any usable evidence. But to their credit, State Crime Lab up there examined the duct tape for latent fingerprints. They had a latent print, a left print and a right thumb print on that duct tape. That in and of itself was a miracle. It was, excellent forensics. The Connecticut State Police, when they traveled down to Suffolk County, they brought the prints with them, and we ran them through the Suffolk County data bank and the New York State data bank, and we got a hit to Evans Ganthier.
When I heard the name Evans Ganthier, I did not know who he was or what connection he had with Becky.
Ganthier was somewhat of a predator, and his demeanor, I think, was designed to make him look less imposing or less frightening than he was. He was wearing a sweater vest. He didn't look like a scary guy or a predator, and he was very smooth. So the police obtained information about his background. They had the bar video. They were able to determine that Mr. Ganthier was residing in Suffolk County, not too far from where Rebecca was, and they had his picture. You could see that Ganthier's phone moved then from Rebecca's home in Medford west to an area consistent with his home in Port Jefferson.
Becky's memorial was beautiful. She had a pink coffin with roses all around. Those were our favorite flowers.
So many people there. So many people loved her. It was really tough.
He then ultimately told the police that, yes, he was with Rebecca. He did meet her at her house, that he was not there for sex. They were just talking and hanging out, that he invited her to come back to his house in Port Jefferson, and she agreed to come with him. And Evans Ganthier told the police that as they were driving back to his house, Rebecca appeared to be in some distress. She was frothing a little bit at the mouth, and she seemed to have trouble breathing. And he claimed that when they got to the house, she was unsteady on her feet, and that was when Rebecca stumbled and she tripped over what he described as a set of dumbbells that he had, and she hit her head on the floor. But he insisted that he didn't kill her. He didn't know what to do, so he put her into the back of his SUV and thought about going to the hospital, which was only a few minutes from his house. So he started to drive, didn't get very far before he panicked, and he thought that this might not be a good idea for him. So he went back to his house, and he told the police that she tragically expired. And then he panicked some more, and he decided that he would just cut off all her identifying features, and kept saying, "You can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt I killed her." Because he was in a panic and bought rubber gloves and duct tape. And that after he cut up the body, he wrapped her up using sheets, and he drove around. He wasn't sure what to do. And ultimately, he bought some gasoline at a local gas station. He pulled his car over, tossed her on the ground, a little off the roadway, dumped the gas he had on her, and he lit her on fire. And then he drove off. This person was trying to deflect the investigation away from murder.
It wasn't her. You feel stupid because you believed it, because you had so much hope.
So you have a person who's trying to tell you, hey, listen, this was a tragic accident. I certainly didn't kill her. I just panicked. I know what I did was terrible, but I didn't kill her. And so, P.S., you can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt I killed her. Investigators had to make sure that they had enough evidence to prove that this was not an accident. And I was very candid with Barbara to say, this is the issue, in particular in the form of medical examiner's report, to ensure that the cause of death was actually a homicide and that it was the result of a stab wound to the liver and not a head injury.
I was more than just confused. It was gut wrenching, and your mind is just in a whirlwind. But the truth of the matter is, the detectives said that they would go to the ends of the earth to bring him back to justice.
They're now going to follow up on all the investigative information to prove what really happened that night. So they were able to obtain video footage showing the Ganthier's vehicle driving onto the ferry, and there was footage of Ganthier coming out of his car and going up the steps. And he did not look like a panicked person. Using the cell site information from his phone, they went to the areas in Connecticut he was at, and then they went to the grocery store. They asked for video surveillance and receipts for the time frame that they now knew he was in Connecticut. And lo and behold, they found a receipt on a particular register for duct tape and rubber gloves at a particular time, and then they got the video footage and they looked for that time from that register, and there's Evans Ganthier purchasing duct tape and rubber gloves. That footage became critically important because here's a person who's just panicked. So you would expect to see a demeanor perhaps consistent with somebody panicking. They're disorganized, they're dropping their change, they're looking around, they're shaking. He was as calm as a cucumber. And when they rang up the duct tape and the gloves, he waited for the receipt. And then when they handed him the receipt, he waited for his change, and then he looked at it as if he was checking it calmly, put everything away. So that is not the demeanor of a completely panicked, innocent person. That's the demeanor of a cold-blooded killer who's trying to get away with murder. The police searched the house, looking for the real murderer, which was a dumbbell. And they did find dumbbells. In the garage, they didn't find any blood stains, but the reason for that is that he painted over the floor like in a big square. So as a result, they were unable to get any forensic evidence. The medical examiner opined that there was no evidence that she suffered blunt force trauma to the head that could have resulted in death.
Now, breaking story. Police may have solved the murder of a Long Island woman. 30-year-old Evan Scoutier has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder in the death of 24-year-old Rebecca Koster.
In New York State, second-degree murder is intentional murder. What the state of mind needs to be is that at the exact moment you acted, you were acting with the intent to cause death.
The detectives had called us and told us that they arrested their suspect. At that point, I had just become overwhelmed with emotion.
Because all of the evidence that we had, including the forensic evidence on Becky's body and in Evans Ganthier's car, our theory essentially was that Ganthier cozied up to Rebecca and, whatever his line was, she clearly gave him her address and thought that they could hang out in the car. He wanted something from her she didn't want to give up. She rebuffed his offer. He pulled her towards him. She ended up with a stab wound in the lower torso. This was not a panicked person trying to eradicate any evidence of the crime of accident. He was trying to eradicate evidence of the crime of murder. A big part of the forensics, in my view, was that there's always a little truth to lies. So he's saying that Rebecca was perfectly fine in my car. She was agreeing to come back with me. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she starts gagging and frothing at the mouth. Gagging and frothing at the mouth is what would happen to somebody who had been stabbed and they were bleeding out. As you're dying, that's what you exhibit. The DNA in the blood was identified to Rebecca Koster.
I refer to Becky's murder as it because it's not human. It's a demon. When it came out, it lied, said it didn't do it. We had to listen for the first time what that animal did to Becky. I wished at that point that I didn't go, and I can honestly say it took my breath away.
Absolutely horrific. That someone want to do this to someone so kind. It is pure evil.
The defendant, Evans Ganthier, he's trying to portray himself as a regular guy, but his true colors shine through immediately for the jury. As I was making the point that the killer left his thumbprint on the duct tape that was wrapped around Becky, and those thumbprints were identified to the defendant, and I pointed Evans Ganthier, and as I pointed to him, he put both his thumbs up, like, thumbs up, and it was frightening. The jurors were aghast. 5.5 hours later, they came back with their guilty verdict. There were definitely gasps and there were definitely sobs from Becky's family. I could hear her mother at the prosecution table. Just audibly, they started crying.
$25 isn't enough for what he took from so many people.
Telling Becky's story is important because that demon can become eligible for parole, and we need to keep it there for the rest of its life so that it can never, ever destroy another family like it has destroyed ours.
Evan Scanthier should never see the light of day again. He should stay locked up in a cage where he can't hurt anybody. He should never be paroled. He has never accepted responsibility for what he did to Rebecca. So you can't rehabilitate someone who has yet to accept responsibility and show remorse for what they actually did. That's why, as a prosecutor, you do this work and you do it for so long. To be able to give the family a sense of peace, a sense of closure, and a sense of justice.
This has impacted me tremendously since it happened. Even if I just go out with the girlfriends, or if I go out on a date, I will share my location. If I'm not coming home, I text someone.
This necklace was a picture that was taken of Becky and I, and they had it engraved on the back, always my blessing. And she always was. From the first time we looked at each other on the day she was born until the last day I saw her.
I need to cut my bangs. This is awful. Do you see this?
When I left, she was there alone. I was not aware that someone was coming to the apartment that night. Turn the security alarm back on. I'm going to call 911.
She didn't have any idea who he was. It was a total stranger to her.
I do not know how long he had been watching her.
Iowa is a trusting place, but sometimes that lack of fear, it can lead to your worst nightmare.
Where is she? Is she okay?
There's monsters lurking around every corner, and you're not going to see it coming.
A young woman is missing tonight after leaving a bar with a stranger, then texting help to a friend.
You are watching her terrifying abduction.
A missing woman's new body was discovered in this ravine.
Miraculously, the young woman survived.
There is an alarming crisis of violence, kidnapping, and murder against innocent women. The senseless murder has struck a chord with thousands of women. This has sparked a global movement online of women sharing their own fears. They're united under a hashtag, text me when you get home. Ways that women are all too familiar with.
Hi guys, I'm gonna wait because there's currently no one here. Jessina was very loving, very caring person. Always wants to see the good in people.
Like, I'm clumsy, I'm dorky, and I'm obsessed with penguins.
She was very giving, very carefree, very happy, very joyful. She was just very trusting. And I kind of instilled that to her. And I loved him, but I love my children more. The community of Burlington, Iowa is a river town. It's about medium sized for Iowa. And it kind of has a small town feel. The downtown's really nice and pretty, and the river walks.
The community was great. You know, you never had to worry about your kids playing outside or having your doors locked.
There is not a lot of crime anywhere in Iowa.
This is a very safe state to live. It's a very safe place to live.
I'm really just a small town girl. I don't have any kind of, I didn't come from any special family. You know, my family are actually, we come from poor. My family was poor, very, very, very poor, actually.
When you have a large family, you can't go to fast food restaurants because it costs your salary, basically, or your income. I learned early on to make meals and baking, and I love sweets. So I baked, and I enjoyed it.
Growing up, my mom would always make these weird concoctions, and she'd always, you know, bake some fun stuff. And so that was always something that was in my life, was baking. It was my sister's sweet 16 birthday party, and I basically told her, let me try your cake.
She thought back to those memories baking with her mother, and she decided to bake her sister a 16th birthday cake in the shape and using the colors of Victoria's Secret bag. And that was it. That was the moment that the spark really turned on for her.
And so I did it, and I just remember like kind of going crazy on it, just trying different things.
She made it to look like Victoria's Secret. And the cake was delicious, and I'm like, bravo.
It set like a fire in me. Like it was like I found something that I have never felt so much joy, so much sense of accomplishment, so much just, you know, just that feeling of just being so happy and doing something you truly love.
She is a really good artist, and she has a really good eye for it, and you could definitely tell that that was her calling. That was what she was meant to be doing.
People in Burlington loved her cookies and her cakes. She had a nice clientele, and it just made her grow more.
I met Justina when I had ordered a cake from her. We were kind of friends, like on social media, and then we started really hanging out and becoming closer friends. I think it was, we were kind of both in the same point in our life where we were single, had gone through separations, both single parents. I think that's what really brought us closer together. We were really kind of getting to know each other, hanging out in the backyard, barbecuing, hanging out with our kids, going shopping. Texting was definitely a form of communication. I mean, we would text about silly little stuff, pictures, or our kids doing something funny, or hey, what are you doing tonight?
She sold through social media, I think mainly through Facebook and Instagram. So you message her on either of those platforms and ask for, you know, a Toy Story cookie set, and she'd get back to you with the costs.
She was so ready to give herself to the world so she could have this business. So like, here I am. I'm here, world. I can bake. I can do this, and her work just got better.
So I was getting busier. Once I left and got my own place, I finally got my own place, and for my kids and me, and I started to grow. My business really started to grow.
It was a well-populated area. There were many times you would pull up and there's cars parked in the street at the houses, and you just never really paid attention. Like, if there was someone in the car, or, you know, I don't feel like we really felt like we had to take that much precaution. Obviously, when you go out, you know, if you're at a bar or something like that, you know, you look out for your friend, don't leave your drinks, things like that. But outside of that, no.
She always said that she felt pretty safe. She was pretty trusting.
I think at that point in time, the relationship
relationship wise. She was single and she had her friends that she hung out with and things like that. And so, it seemed like it wasn't a big deal to her.
Being an unlicensed at-home baker, Justina could legally only sell her wares out of her home or at a farmer's market. And all of her labels had to include her home address. The reason for this is when you go to a bakery, you can see what sort of shape, at least the outside is, if you can't see in the kitchen. So when people are purchasing from someone off of Facebook, the health department wants to give them the opportunity to see where does this baked good come from. And so for their part, it's important that people are allowed to see what the home looks like and where food is being served from.
People came and paid, or they paid online and then came to her home to pick up. I mean, it didn't seem like it was a big deal. Yeah, she had talked to me about that, which is pretty nuts. To my knowledge, I don't think she was aware of who this man was.
As far as just, how I've gotten here, I've just been really, really adamant on working really hard and perfecting my craft. So to have that support from people who don't even know me, who just follow me and follow my work, and to tell me that I'm an inspiration, I don't want to cry. I'm trying not to. It means a lot, a lot.
I think she was definitely shocked. I think she was a little speechless, like didn't know what to say or how to react.
She didn't have any idea who he was. It was a total stranger to her. But I believe it was pretty traumatic from what she disclosed to me.
August 13th, it was really nice out because I remember I was sitting in my hammock outside. We didn't have any plans that day, but Justina had texted me because she was upset about the father of her children. He didn't want to give the kids back to her. They were having a disagreement about that. So I had went over to Justina's apartment to help her find her divorce papers or her, child care papers on the computer because she's like, I can't find our paperwork. And she was kind of frantic about it, like, I don't know what to do. I can't find this paperwork. And, this has our custody papers in it. She was obviously upset. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, you probably got a copy emailed to you. So we'll just look through your email and see if we can find the copy that was emailed to you. I was probably there for maybe a half hour. Found the paperwork that she needed. She had calmed down, she wasn't crying anymore and didn't seem, as angry as what she was. I was like, hey, call me later if you need anything or text me. Otherwise, I'll talk to you tomorrow. When I left, she was there alone. The father of her children, he lived in Des Moines. So while they were having drama, most of that drama was over the phone. So I don't think she had really any concerns at that point in time other than trying to figure things out with him, with the kids. I do not believe she had anyone that she would say was an enemy at this point. I know that there wasn't very much of a gap between when I left and this incident took place. I went home and I got my kids ready for bed and did dinner and, the usual routine of the night. My plan was to get the kids settled in and then, maybe call her, text her, and check on her and see how she was doing. I'm sorry, just need a minute. My plan was to get the kids settled in and then, maybe call her, text her, and check on her and see how she was doing. I don't recall what time it was. She called me on the phone. She was absolutely hysterical. It was hard to even understand what she was saying to me. And I remember telling her repeatedly, like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, can you calm down? And I finally understood it. She kept telling me that she needed to come over. She needed to come over. And I was like, okay, like, just, I'll shut the security alarm off and open the garage door for you, just come on over. And so she hung up the phone. So when Justina got there, her hair was wet and she was wearing like clothes, like old clothes that were like ripped. And I was like, she was just absolutely hysterical. She was crying and I couldn't understand anything she was saying to me. And I'm like, okay, you just you gotta calm down. Like, you gotta take a deep breath and repeat what you're saying. And I just kept running my fingers through her hair and I'm like, it's gonna be okay. Like, it's gonna be okay. You're safe now. My first instinct was to just tell the kids, like, lock the doors, turn the security alarm back on. I asked my oldest daughter to get my phone. I'm like, I'm going to call 911. And then when I heard it come out of her mouth, I'm sorry. when she told me, I was just like, what?
Are you sure you're ready to do this? I had just been corresponding with the father of my children, and I was a little bit distraught over that, and I just had some things going on in my life where mentally I wasn't thinking very clearly, I would say. I had multiple people coming in and out of my home. When you're a business at home, you're just used to it, and never once did I think I'd ever be harmed in my home. Not once. A lot of times my mom, I'd be like, hey, someone's coming over to pick this up, or even a friend, I would let them know just for, safety in mind.
Justina's business was on the upswing, but she was right at that tipping point where her bank account was in the hundreds, not in the thousands. And as a young mother, she needed to make money.
I was getting low on money. I just remember thinking, like, how am I going to do this? I didn't have any other form of income. So I was just praying that someone would contact me for order. And I was just figuring out, okay, what can I do to make money? What can I do? Because I had, bills coming up. I remember getting an email from an Emily Barron's asking for a very large order. And I just remember thinking, like, oh my God, like, God is answering my prayers. Like, this is going to be great. I need this money. This is going to be like close to like $2,000. I have like not even $100 in my bank account right now.
She was so excited about it. I remember her reading me the email, and she was so excited about, this huge order that she had just gotten. And I was like, that's awesome.
She wanted these really pretty floral cookies, and I was super excited because I was just learning florals, and I felt like I was getting a hang on them, and I was like, oh, I can totally do this.
She was so excited because she's like, I can pay my rent for next month, and I can buy my kids' school clothes, and she was definitely super excited about, her financial situation with this order.
Because the order was rather large and it was also needed to be rushed, payment was to be due upfront. So I have a policy with my work. If it's any less than 2 weeks, full payment has to be made because I have to get the materials and the supplies. We'd email back and forth. It was my understanding that she would come drop by a check later in the day, and I was super accommodating, and she was supposed to come a certain time, and I was like, okay, no problem. I was very emotionally distraught. And then I called April. She came over to console me and just be there for me. She was helping me find some paperwork. And I actually thought the client would come when she was there, which would have been perfect. But they had made an excuse with their dog when April was there. So April leaves, and I'm feeling a little bit better. I'm still, my cheeks are very red because I've been crying inconsolably. I'm just very upset. Like I said, I was very emotionally distraught at the time. And then there was a knock at my door. I answered the door, and it was a rather large man, easily 3 times my body weight, very tall, older. He said to me, I am the husband of Emily Behrens, and I'm here to give you money for this order. I didn't think anything of it. That's happened before. I've had correspondence with people, and then the husband would show up. He gave me his card. I had Square. I had a Square set up, and I just pulled my phone out, and it wasn't going through. It kept like being denied, like twice. He tried to swipe it twice, and the payment was denied. So then he was like, okay, let me contact Emily and see if she can just bring cash. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. And he's like, but I'm gonna need a paper receipt. And I was like, okay, yeah, not an issue. I opened the door. It was later than what I usually like people to pick up, but I was not thinking much of it at the time. But it definitely was a lot later than what I would feel comfortable with. He was like, okay, let me contact Emily and see if she can just bring cash. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. And he's like, but I'm gonna need a paper receipt. And I was like, okay, yeah, not an issue. So at that point, he just walks in my home, which made me feel uncomfortable, but he was super kind. He noticed my eyes were red, and he asked me, not to get into your personal life, but it looks like you had been crying. Are you okay? I told him, no, I'm not okay. And I kind of gave him a little bit of the situation that was going on. And he was like, well, I can help you. I have a really close friend who's a lawyer, and they can help you with this situation. I believed him. We were waiting for this Emily woman to get here, so he was in my home, and he was being very, very kind to me. And he called his wife. She had said that she went to go pick up something at the gas station, and then she'll be right. I lived very close to the gas station, so she was close, and she was just picking up something, and then she'd be right there. And he was like, do you want anything? And I said, oh no, that's really kind of you, but I don't. And I just remember thinking, like, this man is a blessing. Like, not only are they going to help me because I'm I just remember thinking, this man is a blessing. He's so nice, he's so kind. There are good men out there, and I was just feeling very blessed that they were going to order this very large order for me. He was so kind, so kind, like one of the nicest men I've ever met. He never gave me his name. I didn't know his name. But he said, I know your mom. And I was like very confused. He told me I looked really stressed, and asked me like if he could, that he was a masseuse. And he basically said that I can crack your neck for you really quick, and he goes, I think that would help you calm down. And I was a little like, why would you want to crack my neck? But then he like grabbed my neck and he cracked it really fast, and it was like, whoa, okay, that actually did help, thank you. He called somebody and he spoke to them, and he made it seem like he was talking to a lawyer. So I was just like, wow, this guy's just a really nice guy. Next thing I know, he has his hand over my mouth and a gun to my head. This is so I'm gonna be on some documentary. I'm so confused what the hell's going on. And he gets close to me, like on top of me, and he says, if you scream, I will blow your brains out. I just remember wanting to fight him and trying to, but he was very big and he was on top of me, and very strong. And then I remember my kids, and I think I can't live without them. I don't want to die. And I just remember thinking, like, this is how I'm gonna die. He takes zip ties and he ties my hands behind my back, and reminding me to stay quiet or he will shoot me. And I'm very quiet. I don't fight him. I was hopeful that if I cooperated, I wouldn't die. The only thing I could think of was my kids. That was it. They're too young. They need a mom. Like, I can't die. I said, please don't hurt me. I have 2 kids. I'm a mom. I'm a person. I have a family. Please don't hurt me. My sister called, and he allowed me to answer the phone because he didn't want it to seem suspicious that I was ignoring a phone call. So I had to basically tell her, like, there's this guy here, but he's helping me. He's just paying for this order. She believed me. I wish I could have said something that could have alerted her. You should have some kind of safe word, like, oh, the weather's great, or whatever, something that no one would know, but you just don't think that's going to happen to you, Like, I didn't think that was going to happen to me. And then he started rubbing my ankle. He got close to me and started rubbing my ankle. And I knew then and there what he wanted. He took me to my room. He took my clothes off of me and he said, don't worry, I'm not going to touch you. This is my plan. You're not going to run if you're naked. But he sexually assaulted me. You see this stuff on documentaries, you see this stuff on TV, and you never think it's gonna happen to you. And when you're in that moment, none of it feels real. You feel like you're in this messed up dream. It just kind of like left my body in a sense because I felt like I had to put myself in this mindset. I just wanted him to go. I didn't want to die. So I was just in like this survival mode. After he, sexually assaulted me, he told me that he needed me to take a shower. And he was right there at the door watching me with his gun. Just kind of, he was sweating profusely. He was wiping the sweat off him. I got dressed and put on something quick. He's like, all right, I'm going to leave now, but I just need like $40. Can you give me some money? Like, I'm kind of strapped for cash. I didn't have any cash on me. I said, I don't have cash. I was like, we can go to an ATM. And he was like, okay, yeah. He's like, now here's the thing. I have this gun. And there are people outside. So if you try to run, I will shoot you. So you need to walk outside. You need to be calm. He's like, I'm trusting you. I drove him to an ATM with my car. He took $40 is what he said he would take. I just wanted him gone. That's all I thought. I wanted him to go. I just remember thinking, oh my God, I'm not dead. Oh my God, what is going on? So I called 911. The police officer showed up and they actually sent a male officer. So Justina didn't feel comfortable going with the male officer at that point in time, which I completely understood. I took pictures of my hands. Because he tied me up with zip ties, there was very clear marks on my wrists. She was in the bed. She was shaking. And she's very pale. And she had this look like, what is going on? What has happened? I just remember laying in a hospital bed thinking I was in a nightmare. I was in such denial. And I just remember staring at the hospital bed, just completely in shock, not really wanting to accept that it was reality. When he was there in my place, he said, I know your mom. And I kind of remembered my mom telling me a story of how she has a friend from work. Her husband is very abusive. He has raped her, and then he beat the crap out of her with a hammer to the point where she was hospitalized for it. And I just remember asking her, Mom, you remember that story you told me about? And she said, yeah, what about it? And I said, do you know his name? I kind of remembered my mom telling me a story of how she has a friend from work. Her husband is very abusive. I was like, could this be her husband? Could this be the guy that my mom had told me about? So I remember looking him up on Facebook. And sure enough, his face was right there. His name is Stephen Mock.
I'm in a world when I'm like, oh, my daughter is harmed, my daughter's violated, and I know who did it.
She couldn't sleep. She was definitely in fear of her safety. She was just very much traumatized.
After a significant trauma like this, everything is impacted. It just shakes the foundation of your whole life, really.
I didn't know what to do. I just remember laying in bed thinking, like, this is going to destroy my business, and I don't want this business anymore. I don't want it. It hurt me. It hurt me. It's something that I've been growing. I just had the worst thing happen to me because of this business. I kept thinking my business hurt me.
The cookie and cake baking community, which she had been a part of, they responded with a deluge of support and kindness.
My phone blew up. People were just, it quickly went viral throughout the cookie community and the cake community. And people were just so kind and understanding, very loving.
This comes down to pretty much one person's decision to do harm to someone else. But there were so many people who decided to help and to do what they could and to support her that we're kind of trying to balance the scales a little bit. And I think for Justina, that made a difference.
She was very traumatized. Like any little thing was triggering to her, and she couldn't shower. I helped her take a bath because she couldn't turn the shower on.
I was alive, but I didn't feel alive. I was there, but I didn't feel like I was there. I was just in a very horrible mind state, and I didn't trust anyone. The only thing that, my therapist told me is we can ease it as much as we can and get you to live with this. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. I chose life when I was calm with that man. I chose life. I realize that now, and I'm still choosing life.
He said that the sex between himself and Justina was consensual. And his defense attorney, in opening arguments, said this would be a story of he said, she said.
I wanted justice. I wanted him to pay for not only what he did to me, but any woman he had done it to. He needs to get off the streets so he cannot hurt another woman again. And he messed with the wrong woman. He messed with the wrong person. I believe he was stalking me using my business, because he used my business email, fabricated this whole story to get to me by using my business. So I believe he targeted me through social media.
This was a woman who had suffered something we wish upon no one, and was strong enough and brave enough to relive it in front of strangers over days.
One of the things that I helped her work through with that was, yes, you're going to come face to face with the perpetrator, but this is in a court of law where the last time you encountered this person face to face, he had all the power. And in this instance, you're going to have all the power.
The hardest thing, besides that night, was to get him convicted behind bars. Please guilty. The verdict is guilty. We're all crying. But it's guilty. He's going to prison. You can't hurt another woman again. It did end with me. I did it.
I'm very proud of Justina. I would describe Justina as very happy. She is a very powerful woman.
I found Justina to be such an inspirational figure. And Justina being willing to bring it out of the shadows and talk about it, I think truly changed the course of Me Too here in Iowa.
I decided it would be better for me to get a fresh start. I moved. I went to a whole different state. It's hard to heal in a place that harmed you, so I took myself out of that equation.
Really, this could have happened to anyone. You know, how many times have you bought something off Marketplace and met someone at their house, or had someone come to your house? There's monsters lurking around every corner.
I am not the same person I was before he did this to me. I am a whole different person, but I'm growing to love who I've become and who I'm becoming.
Queen had a very big heart, a very tender heart. She was just so happy all the time.
There wasn't even a thought something bad happening in this town.
She's like, oh, there's a weird looking guy sitting on the bench over there. I heard her scream. The phone just went dead.
And they had found bloody fingerprints of her hands scraping along a brick wall.
I said, Queen, kidnapping.
My mom called me and she just said, we found the body.
This was a case that started out as a whodunit.
My sister had no enemies.
Lo and behold, he walks in the library.
And at that point, the pieces started to come together. It definitely was just our worst nightmare.
A young woman is missing tonight after leaving a bar with a stranger, then texting help to a friend.
You are watching her terrifying abduction.
A missing woman's nude body was discovered in this ravine.
Miraculously, the young woman survived.
There is an alarming crisis of violence, kidnapping, and murder against innocent women. A senseless murder has struck a chord with thousands of women. This has sparked a global movement online of women sharing their own fears. They're united under a hashtag, Text Me When You Get Home, a phrase that women are all too familiar with.
Rena is my younger sister, and we are 3.5 years apart. My mom didn't have any boys, and so it's always been my mom, myself, and my sister, a very tight, 3 women unit.
Rena had a very big heart and very tender heart. She very nice, very good with her friend in school. She nice with everyone.
She always had a smile on her face. She didn't have a care in the world. She was just so happy all the time. The most friendliest, bubbliest person we all knew. She was studious, but she wasn't a nerd, if that makes any sense. She wasn't nerdy. She was just very smart.
She started volunteering at school. She volunteered with an organization called Best Buddies, where she would partner with a disabled friend in school and just be his buddy for the whole year. She volunteered at a hospice, and she didn't mean to become Miss Popular. She just was.
And the cat. We were best friends. We worked in retail together. We did a lot of shopping. So we would text a lot. We communicated via text. We talked about work, school, what we wanted to do after school, hanging out. We were always talking to each other. We would eat together, and then we would leave, and we would still just text each other or call each other.
She had Fulbright scholarship from U.S. Her dream is want to be international business fashion. They are planning to go on her farm. No boys allowed. Only the group of Pink's best friends go together.
Rena was working at Abercrombie and Fitch during her senior year. She loved the store. She loved her job.
Even though there was employee parking at the mall where we worked, especially if you're closing, you're walking through the parking lot late at night, so we would just call each other to have someone be on the phone with.
I ask Rena every time text me when she got home. So she very responsible. Always texting or calling.
Random attacks on women in Bloomingdale were very, very rare. I can't remember another specific incident when in the Bloomingdale area, especially nothing of this nature.
We were on our way to Orlando for Grad Bash, and I remember Queena and I having a conversation as we're sitting on the bus together. As a precaution, just in case, we should probably have each other's families' phone numbers, because you just never know. It was a Thursday, and it was just a normal day. We were going to celebrate her birthday that weekend because she had just turned 18. A lot of our friends were actually going to go out that night.
The manager asked Queena to stay 1 hour later to help her to close because one employee called out for sick.
So we were on the phone after her shift, and we were talking about her night out. And that's when she had told me that she had to quickly stop through the library on her way home. Didn't think anything of it. It was just she's pulling into the library saying she had to drop off books. As she's driving up to the drop box, she's like, oh, there's a weird looking guy sitting on the bench over there. Make sure you stay on the phone with me. So, of course, I do. She was just planning on using the drop box, so she, in theory, shouldn't have even had to get out of her car.
I heard her door chime going off in her car, and I asked her, "Why are you getting out of your car?" And she had her books that she was returning in the back seat. So she had to exit her vehicle and open up her back door to access the books. And it was within that moment that I heard her scream. The phone just went dead. I called her back immediately. Repeat calling. I kept getting her voicemail. She wasn't answering her phone. Like a few minutes go by and I knew something was wrong.
I looked on the clock and 10 o'clock, and I'm already wondering why she's not home yet.
I called our mutual friend Priscilla. She lived closer to the library. I asked her if she would go to the library to just check on her, make sure it wasn't a prank or something like that, just make sure she wasn't in any danger. Priscilla had started calling her phone as well, and when Priscilla couldn't get through to her, neither could I, that's when she was like, okay, I need to get in my car and go check on her. I just had a feeling like I knew something was wrong, so I had Vanna's number in my phone, luckily.
At 10:20 p.m., my phone rang. I picked up the phone and then Rachel, her voice very shaky. And then she said, "Miss Vanna, I think something happened to Queen."
I told her that I had asked Priscilla to go and check on her, and she was on her way to the library.
So I told Rachel I will be right there.
I was out at a restaurant with a few friends. I saw that I had a couple missed calls from my mom, and I listened to the voicemail, and my mom had left a message that said, "Your sister's missing, call me back right away." My first intuition was my sister went off with a friend to go get ready for her birthday.
I said, "Come to Bloomingdale Library right away. Queen kidnapping."
And I told the table of friends, something's not right, something's wrong, I need to leave. So I got in the car, and my boyfriend at the time drove. I don't think we've ever driven any faster than that. I was so anxious. I remember asking him to pull over, and I just threw up. I was just so torn up inside, so confused. We got back in the car and we kept going. After Priscilla had gotten to the library, that's when she noticed that Queena's car was still running, doors were open, radio playing, and her phone on the ground in pieces. And that's when she knew that something had happened. So Priscilla had called 911.
Looked like a movie, a very scary movie. The door opened, and I heard the music still on, and the sound of the door, bing, 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 like that. I saw next to the driver door, the phone broke down a half, and blood everywhere, and everybody calling her name and running around. We all screaming and crying very loud. In the back of the library is super dark. You cannot see anything.
I mean, just driving up and seeing the like the lights, the ambulance, the sirens, everything, the panic, scary. It definitely was just our worst nightmare. She was like in a ditch area behind the library.
On the way to the library, my mom called me one more time with a very, very short, brief sentence. She just said, "We found the body." I'm thinking, okay, this sounds like my sister's dead.
But Sheila reached her first, and I'm very slow. So the police hold me back. Say, no, let me go, my daughter. I need to come to her.
I received a call from my supervisor. He asked me if I could respond to the Bloomingdale Library. Didn't have a lot of details. He told me that there was a woman beaten up there, and I headed to the Bloomingdale Library.
When we pulled into the library, there was a body on a stretcher, and I was just standing there looking at the scene, watching who I thought was my sister being lifted into the helicopter. I felt a moment of relief, thinking that she must be alive, or else they wouldn't be putting her in a helicopter. Everyone at the library was just huddled around. All you could hear was people crying and saying, "I don't know what happened. Is Queena gonna be okay?" And none of the pieces were fitting together yet.
I arrived at the crime scene. The car's still there. The cell phone's next to the car. It's in two pieces. There's a blood drops on the ground by the cell phone. The blood drops, which can be plainly seen, travel around the back part of the vehicle, and they go north to the front of the library. We came around the back of the library and we saw a backpack laying on the ground. The contents were scattered throughout the ground, and there was two pretty large blood stains that you could see. Obviously, they were from the victim. There was also a no parking sign in front of the library with a bloody handprint on it. So that must have been Queena's handprint. She was fighting all the way.
We didn't really know the extent of the attack whenever we first got to the hospital.
I said, my daughter in the emergency room. I want to see her. And they said, no, you cannot see her now. But see the good hand. 13 doctors around her trying to save her life.
It was quiet. It was very solemn.
We're just all waiting there. We had no idea what the extent of her injuries were, if she was alive. So it was heart-wrenching.
When I finished up at the crime scene, I went to the hospital in hopes of doing an interview with Queena that night. Of course, I got there. Queena was unconscious. So what I did was I interviewed her mother and I interviewed Anna. And I wanted to know if Queena had a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend. Did she have a beef with anybody? Was there anybody at work that she was having problems with? Was there anybody at school that she was having problems with?
Queena is very good girl. She don't have any boyfriend.
We couldn't think of anybody who would do such a thing. She worked at the mall. If there could have been a disgruntled customer or random person.
Crimes person on person. I would say usually the victim and suspect know each other. We didn't have that. It makes it really tough at that point. That night, I spoke with several of the hospital staff members, and they told me that they did not expect Queena to make it through the night. This was a very unique case. We kept a deputy there for the safety of the victim. We don't know who did this. We don't know what they know. Could it be somebody that's going to come back and try to finish her off?
I remember someone finally walking into the room and saying, "You can see her now." And my gosh, that was such a relief. I expected to walk in and see a smiling face, immediately thinking about what I would say to her, how I would comfort her. "We got this. Let's figure out how to get you out of here." My sister was unrecognizable. Both of her eyes were completely swollen shut from being beaten. Her jaw and nose looked to have been broken, and she was not talking. And she was not really looking around either. She had hundreds of ant bites all over.
It was just like an eerie, unsettling feeling. Everyone was just torn and upset over it. We were just scared.
I was asked by the nurses to help them perform a rape kit. And so I asked my mom to step out so that I could do this with Queena. I didn't want my mom to have that memory. So this was the first time that they said the word rape. I didn't know she was raped. I just knew she was beaten up. And then I had to be the one to tell my mom. She was just silent. I think she, in that moment, didn't care about anything but saving Queena and making sure she got better.
Bloomingdale police are still on the hunt for the unknown assailant who sexually assaulted a daycare center employee at knife point last June.
We possibly could have had a sex offender. So what I did was when I got back to the office, I did a computer check. There was over 101 registered sex offenders living within a 5-mile radius of the library. That made things even more difficult because every single one of these sex offenders had to be located, interviewed, and their whereabouts accounted for on the night that this happened.
She is screaming, she fighting, and she pushing everyone out. She is look like fighting a tiger or lion. Finally, she slowly wake up.
She had said a few things like, "What happened to me?" She said, "Why can't I see?" And at one point she said, "Did they find him?" I said, "Someone wanted your purse and they hit you. They're going to look for him now." And I didn't mention anything about the rape. I remember her asking me if I thought she would still be able to make it to prom the next week. I said, "Of course she can go to prom next week. I will work magic with makeup and you will go. So don't even worry about that."
I wanted to see who she was talking to, maybe if she had met up with anybody that day prior to going to the library. Nothing came from that. I learned of the exact times that she was on the phone with Rachel, and when the phone went dead, obviously we assumed that that's when she was attacked. Had it not been for Rachel, probably would not have a male suspect.
She's like, "Oh, there's a weird looking guy sitting on the bench over there."
Not a lot to go on, but still, it's something. So we got the details of the crime out to the media as fast as we could.
Another major development in the case of a young woman raped and beaten outside the Bloomingdale Library.
It was put out to every local radio station, every local TV station.
I had to go to her friends and told them it's okay, you don't need to wait, I will text you when I have the update about Queen.
After watching the news, we were always texting each other to find out what the true story was. Who heard from the detectives today, and who knows what they're telling us versus what we see on the news. My sister kept waking up asking if she was safe, and at that point I wasn't worried about finding this person. I was so consumed with my sister.
At the night time, I saw her body start shaking, and I told the doctor, the night doctor, I said, what happened to Queen? But I see her body shaking. I told him, come and check Queen. I think she has seizure. They took CAT scan for her brain. Her brain keeps swelling and keeps swelling.
And they said, your sister's got something called brain injury. She's fighting for her life. And the only way to save her is to have some surgery on her brain and to put her into a medically induced coma so that she does not have a lot of brain activity.
Because if her brain activity go up, will be more brain cell die.
And we can't guarantee if she'll wake up.
She had a skull fracture, her nose was broken, and she suffered several strokes.
The attacker strength cut off the oxygen, go to her brain.
She actually lost her sight from her being strangled. There was a young kid from Bloomingdale High School, and him and his father were actually at the book drop at about 9:30 that night. They drove through the library, and while they were going through the book drop, he said to his father, I know that kid sitting right there on the bench. It was Kendrick Morris, a sophomore at Bloomingdale High School. Initially, we have Morris there at 9:30. The attack was somewhere around 10:08 that night. We removed all of the books out of the book drop. We went through every one of those books, and we located and interviewed everyone that had put a book in there that night. And there was one lady that went through, dropped off books. She actually saw Kendrick Morris still at the library at 10 o'clock. She even spoke to Morris. She asked him if he needed a ride. He told her no, he was waiting for his mother to come and pick him up. Now we have Morris at the library, 8 minutes before the attack. I do a background check on Kendrick Morris, and I find out that he was actually arrested for cruelty to animals. So the next day, following the incident, there was a couple of detectives. I believe they were there to possibly interview staff members of the library that morning. So all of a sudden, Morris walks in the library. We take him into custody. He was very mild-mannered, extremely polite, and extremely respectful. In the back of the library, underneath the blood spatter laying in the grass, was a Wendy's utensil, and it was filed to a point. We compare fingerprints to prints we found at the scene, and we have a match. Morris's fingerprint was on that utensil.
When we heard that they had found him, we were just shocked to hear that he was just a kid himself. When I heard he was 16 years old, I thought, how could a child be capable of something like this? There's just no way. He looks like a kid. When they took my sister off of the medication that was keeping her medically induced, they said she may never wake up. It's a waiting game, so let's see.
The doctor said, sorry, we do our best already. We saved Queen alive, but her brain already damaged.
That can't be right. She's gonna wake up. I feel it. I have so much hope. And I would set up all these teddy bears that she got from her friends, and I would play her music. And I said, your favorite song. And I promise you, she smiled when that song came on. And I could not believe it. I pressed that button to call the nurse, and I was like, my sister's awake. She smiled. They said, oh, that's a reflex thing. We're sorry. And I said, I don't think so. I think she's waking up. We stayed there with her for many days, just watching, looking at her face, seeing if she's going to open her eyes, and nothing was happening. I got to text her friends and her family, just keep everyone updated. The messages were, how is she doing? Is she talking yet? Can she see yet? Is she eating yet? Is she walking yet? It was sad because I had to say no to all those questions every day.
There's a nearby McDonald's, and some detectives went over there, and they looked at the surveillance tape the night of the incident. Lo and behold, they have Kendrick Morris walking in, and he walks over to the Walmart, puts him not far from the scene, right after the attack. Every little bit helps, makes the case stronger and stronger.
So we had social workers and caseworkers coming in and out, preparing my mom to pick an acute care facility to transfer Queena to a nursing home where Queena would spend the rest of her days in a vegetative state. She's not going to that nursing home. I knew that my sister could hear me. She started reacting to things that I would say, and she started laughing, and she started smiling. She started opening her eyes, and she started becoming aware of things, but she wasn't talking.
She understands everything. That brain not damaged.
She wasn't able to walk on her own. She wasn't able to talk. She wasn't able to make eye contact, eat. But she would laugh and she would smile. And that's how we were able to know that she was happy or not and that she was with us. We started Googling things like brain injury rehab, and we figured out that we could take Queena out of Tampa General and transfer her to rehabilitation in Sarasota.
We get his DNA, and of course we send it to see if it's a match for foreign DNA that was found in Queena. And we have a match. We obviously think that Queena had left work that night, called Rachel.
She's pulling into the library saying she had to drop off books. As she's driving up to the drop box, she's like, oh, there's a weird looking guy sitting on the bench over there. She had her books that she was returning in the back seat. She opened her door.
Queena got out of the car. While she was putting the books into the book drop, somewhere around 10:08 is when the suspect attacked her.
I heard her scream, and she dropped the phone, and the phone just went dead. My sister was fighting for her life, hanging on to the pole for dear life.
While he was going through the beating, trying to drag her back to the library.
They had found bloody fingerprints of her hands scraping along a brick wall.
Banged her off that wall. When he did, he must have had that utensil in his pocket, and it must have fallen out on the ground. Queena was unconscious. She was also sexually battered, strangled her several times. After the attack, he scattered contents of the backpack throughout the ground. He walks into McDonald's. He orders 2 Happy Meals, and he sits down and he eats those Happy Meals like nothing in the world had just happened. He gets done eating and he walks over to the Walmart and he's shopping. He's looking at video games and he's walking around. Then we see him use the phone inside the Walmart. He calls a taxi and the taxi takes him home.
He did not think that he had to flee. He had nothing to really hide, and it was just another normal night for him.
On the surface, you probably would not have thought that this kid was capable of doing what he did.
You know, he didn't look like a monster. But then I looked at my sister, and I knew that it was a monster that did that to her. She works hard. She does a lot of different therapies. You have to appreciate just the small victories with her.
Morse's DNA goes into the database as DNA from unsolved crimes. We find out that Morse is a match to another unsolved sexual battery that we had 10 months prior to him attacking Queena. He entered a daycare center and he raped a 62-year-old woman at knife point. It was early in the morning. I assumed that she was there by herself, opening it up. Morse forced his way in with a knife. His face was covered. Could not tell who it was, but he was subsequently charged with that one too.
At the trial, that was the first time that I realized that this person was a monster. He had grown up a bit and lost a lot of weight, and he had zero emotion on his face.
All the entire court proceedings. Family was very concerned, very worried. They wanted to make sure that things ran smoothly and they were going to get justice for Queena.
It was a big decision on whether to bring my sister to the trial or not. She always suffered neuro storms every now and then that would cause her to go into a panic attack, and she would cry and yell out. And I knew that sitting her in a courtroom, talking about what happened to her in the same room as her attacker, I couldn't do that to her. Even though several people were telling us that it would help the case because the jury would be able to see her. I didn't want her to have those memories. So I attended in her place. Going through the trial was probably one of the hardest things that I had done. Having to relive that moment, him being in that room, it was hard. I remember just looking at him from the side the whole time, just to see something, and there was nothing. I remember he wouldn't even look at us. Like, he just kind of kept his head down. He couldn't even look any of us in the eyes. And I was thinking, okay, this is a cold-blooded person. There was a Supreme Court rule that came out that said it was cruel and unusual to give a minor a life sentence in prison for a crime that did not result in a death.
Queena's entire life has been impacted. She wasn't able to go to prom. She wasn't able to graduate with the rest of us. She wasn't able to go to UF. Her life ended that night. And so we felt that he should have gotten life as well.
Now, Kendrick will be eligible for parole, but I doubt very likely that he'll get out. When I was at the resentencing, there was a doctor, psychiatrist, that interviewed Kendrick, and he asked Kendrick, "What do you think would happen had you not been arrested?" And Kendrick said to him, "I would ultimately have killed somebody."
She was only 18 years old when she was attacked. She's in her 30s now. She has her entire life to live. And we're just hanging on to the hope that there's going to be some sort of medical advancements that can heal the brain.
Right now, we happy what we have, and every small improving, we thank God for that.
He will never hear from my sister that she forgives him because she can't talk. So that he's just going to have to live with for the rest of his life. But I can say, I forgive you. You know, my mom can say, I forgive you. We can take what we've been done with and we can make it as whole as we can. We can help other families. We can inspire other women.
I think it's important having that precaution of just having a friend on the phone.
If my sister wasn't on the phone with Rachel, no one would have known that she was attacked. She would be laying in the woods behind the library den.
I mean, it's hard for me to agree with that I saved her life because her life would be so much different now.
She had befriended a student at Bloomingdale High School who volunteered for us, and for his senior prom, he decided that he wanted to ask my sister to go with him. Of course, she wanted to go to prom. People around the community started reaching out to us. What can we do to help Quina get to prom? We met a local seamstress, and she came and she took a look at the prom dress that my sister was going to wear. And she said, I'm going to modify this. We received a call from the local Harley-Davidson club, and they said, we're going to escort your van to the prom. There were hundreds of bikes on our street. It was so loud. It sounded like a thunderstorm. So instead of finding the why, we focus on the what now. That's the only thing I have left to be able to hear her. I hope that never gets wiped out.
Orange County Sheriff's Office, how can I help you?
I'm calling to find out if I can have a wellness check.
I called my mom. I was like, hey, when's the last time you spoke to Mia?
His exact words to me was, Mom, I can't find Mia.
The last anybody spoke to her, she was waiting on an Uber to go to the airport.
I thought that it was human trafficking. She's so pretty and so friendly. Maybe she got in a Uber and she was kidnapped. Yes, gloves. Yes, gloves. Yes, gloves. I think that's probably when they knew that this guy could possibly be connected to this.
This red shirt is what Mia was wearing when she was last seen.
Mia, I know you're alive. I know you're out there.
We found a suicide on property. One moment she was there, and the next she is gone.
A young woman is missing tonight after leaving a bar with a stranger, then texting help to a friend.
You are watching her terrifying abduction.
A missing woman's new body was discovered in this ravine.
Miraculously, the young woman survived.
There is an alarming crisis of violence, kidnapping, and murder against innocent women. Senseless murder has struck a chord with thousands of women. This has sparked global movement online of women sharing their own fears. They're united under a hashtag, text me when you get home, a phrase that women are all too familiar with.
Mia is my princess, my daughter, my beautiful daughter. Mia is life, a beautiful light, bright light. Mia is the most perfect human being that I've ever met.
In September of 2021, Mia Marcano was a 19-year-old college student living in Orlando, Florida.
My family is from the U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, St. Croix too. Her dad's family is from Trinidad, and Mia was born in Florida, but nobody couldn't tell her she was not born in St. Croix, Virgin Islands. That's where her heart was.
Carnival is a really big part of our lives in the islands. Carnival is a tradition from the Caribbean. It's the emancipation of slavery, where there were different costumes and you dance all the way up the road. Like it's like a freedom thing. She participated every year.
She loved Carnival like so much. She loved putting on the costumes, dressing up, doing her makeup, going out and dancing and listening to the music that she loved. I think that's probably one of the top things that she enjoyed to do.
From the time Mia was very little, she was in the costume, all dressed up, and she did that for a lot of years. So Carnival time was just our family's time to kind of get together and celebrate and have fun.
Mia was like the glue to both families because she just loved get-togethers, loved being with family. That was Mia.
She was outgoing. She was really funny. She always knew how to bring a vibe. She always knew how to bring happiness.
Mia's interests were sports for sure, dancing. She loved going out, traveling, meeting people.
She's been really good at school her whole life. She always got good grades.